guys, this isn't going to be super scientific. It's just a little bit of a comparison between an AD10, a Bush Ranger, an Ultimate Hunter, a Finn Wolf, and a Murakhan's bull. And so the only really measurement that I'm super concerned with here, I'll put this out for reference. The only thing I'm too concerned with is going to be how that handle contour is, the thickness, profile, and then blade thickness. I do care a little bit about that. And so this just gives you a general idea of the size of the knife. It is about a ½ an inch bigger than everything else on the table here. It's not bigger than the Khan's bull, but I think they're the same. And so that's impressive if you consider what you can do with a knife like this. So here's about the length that you're looking at, and now I'm going to go over blade thicknesses of all. So with this guy, I'll go right to the thickest spot. I'm looking at, let's zero this out. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. 0.15, 0.15, 0.13, that's more so in the region I'm looking for. 0.12, which this is the thickness that is ideal for a folding knife for me. Okay, right around there. I like thinner blades in general, but not bad. I'll tell you that the cutting performance of everything on the table right now is spectacular. I don't own any knives that don't cut well. I have in the past, but they've either been modified or they were purchased and they came from the factory sufficient as they were. And so everything here has been either modified or it's just a great edge as it comes. Let's look at edge thickness here. I'm gonna go about there. 0.4, that's 0.04, we'll round it up a little bit. 0.03, 0.0, we'll round it up to 3. Obviously, Scandi coming down to that 0 edge, you gotta be careful about that. And then the Khan's bull just for fun. Get it in the same spot here, right about there. 0.04, where it's at there. Now, the important part to me, the thing that I probably comment the most on my channel, I'm gonna look for kind of the average thickness in here, or maybe I'll catch a couple different places, broadness rather. So we're looking at right where your first finger is going to go. That's 1.3, we'll round it up. 1.3 is very good. You have that little hook there, which you don't really put your finger on. 1.5, but at least gives you a spot to get a little extra grip on your hand. Less than an inch, 0.9. I wish that they had not taken any meat out of here. And then back here, 1.2, so pretty good on the broadness. Happy with that. 1.0. And about 1.3 is about where I put my finger. 1.35, we'll round it up 1.36. In that notch, 0.97. 1.26, we'll probably round that up. 1.25, well, 24, 1.24 there. And the rest of it is almost an inch. That's 0.99, could round it up to an inch. Sorry if this is boring some of you, but this is actually the stuff that I want to know. I want to know how is it going to feel in my hand. 0.9. Yeah, just a little bit thicker. That's an important part of the measurement to me. The part that is usually bothersome is it's not broad enough and it's too thin, and these are not bad. As far as folding knives go, these are really not bad. There are better ones out there, but not with the triad lock. 0.65, 0.66 or 67, 0.61, 0.48. Definitely a thin blade. Let's check out this Khan's bull. So 0.62 in that first finger position, and then back here 0.9. Yeah, that looks accurate. 0.9. Alright, so out of the blades on the table, obviously the fixed blade, the Murakhan's bull, it doesn't have a gap in the bottom. It's got this nice rubbery texture. This is going to feel the best in hand. Even though it's not the broadest, it just feels the best in hand. It's most comfortable with the least hot spots after working with it for a long time. The Finn Wolf I've had the longest, and I've smoothed the scales out, but it's still a very thin blade. It's very flat on the sides, not a lot of thickness or broadness to this blade, but it's a good EDC. Some people would think this is too big to EDC, but I'm 6'5", 240 pounds. I'm a larger guy, okay? I'm not tiny. And so this thing for me actually does feel small. You see how much binding up there is in my hands there. Working with this for a while with that pocket clip definitely gives me hot spots. But it's a good blade, that's why I've held on to it. For 30 bucks, I don't think you can do better at all than this for a folding knife. That's my opinion. The Ultimate Hunter, definitely a comfortable enough blade. I've whittled with it. I've done a few trips where I took this with and used this as my primary blade, even though I always have a backup. I've sanded this one out as well, so that's probably why it's so comfortable. I've nipped this a little bit. It used to be much more ridge filled. There's scallops and stuff in here that I don't care for. This one is a little tougher to flick right now. I think it's just because it needs to be oiled up. But this has a nice long handle for you big guys out there. It's pretty decent in that respect, but it is not super broad, and it's thick enough. It's thicker than most knives are. A little bit of contouring, but not a lot of contouring. The Ultimate Hunter, this blade is hard to flick open because of the pocket catcher. You really got to put a lot of wrist into it, I found anyways. And I keep my blades just slightly tighter as far as that lock goes. Takes a little more wrist for me, but it works really well with the pants. It's going to rip your pants up a little bit though because there's some sharp ridges in there. This blade, as far as the handle is concerned, I think this is still the most comfortable. I think the Bush Ranger has the most comfortable handle, but I also sanded it. I nixed a piece here. I still wish that this reduction didn't happen in here. You don't really need it to access the thumb plate pocket catcher. And some people like the idea of a guard. I don't. I don't want a guard at all. I want a nice thick round handle. And because of that, if I work with it for a while, my hand does bind up a little bit, but not nearly as bad as it did with the previous two blades. And with this one, the pocket clip is becoming less of an issue because it's kind of riding down here and I can choke up and get a lot of control very close to that blade. And I have not yet cut myself in any way with this kind of blade choking up like this. I know people get concerned. In fact, it's worse on the next blade for me, but decently thick, decently broad. This blade makes me happy. Definitely closes nicely. Part of that is the weight. Part of that is this is just a nice knife. The AD10 definitely flicks open the best out of everything on the table. Probably the best opening knife I've had from cold steel. You think about that. I've had a lot of cold steels, but I think this one opens the nicest. Again, don't need this reduction right here. I don't need anything cut out to get to this thumb plate. It's not hard to get to. The pyramids on this they're really nice actually. Nice and smooth. This blade did come with a few sharp edges. I'm going to have to sand out that G10 probably a little more, but I sanded out the innards. Here I may nix this piece all together because I just don't want it. I wish I could do that here, but I can't because that basically conceals the end of the blade. And when you're trying to do like a chest lever, if you grab a knife like this just digs right in. And so that's exactly wrong. It's exactly not what I want to see, is a big hook like that. If you can see what I'm talking about. I don't want those hooks on there. I think folding knife companies could learn a lot from bushcraft companies that round and smooth is good for your hand and jagged is bad for your hand, unless you're going to wear gloves. And sometimes I do, but most of the time I don't. It's just not that comfortable. But I did sand this out a little bit, and now with that broadness, I'm right up on that blade. I'm actually touching the blade a lot of times, just barely. It's never cut me. It's very comfortable. I have a lot of control. I'm actually really, really impressed with the way that this cuts. I just stropped it up. I just barely touch hairs in my arm, and it's shaving it off again. Very, very happy with S35. It's a pretty decent steel. It's not amazing, but it's pretty decent. And I think for the price that I paid for this, I know most people paid more a couple years ago, but for the price I paid for it, I'm happy with it. S35. It's a big piece of S35. I could have done with a thinner blade, but I'm not going to complain about that because of the cutting performance I'm getting with this. But back to the handle. Between the two, it gives me a nice amount of leverage. I don't really hold a knife like this, but if you do, the nice thing is this giant pocket clip. If we just compare the Look how huge that pocket clip is. It's actually not too intrusive. Doesn't really bother me. I don't feel it too much. I feel it a little bit. But if I move up here, it's not bad at all because it's kind of behind my hand. And so if you have really fat hands, I think you'll still like this knife. If you have really tiny hands, I don't see why you couldn't use a knife like this, even if you have tiny hands. I don't know what the issue would be. But for me, you know, longer fingers, longer hands, you're gonna run into a little bit of that. You're gonna get a little bit of a hot spot over time. Eventually this will give you a bit of a hot spot. So I would just recommend, if you get this, go ahead and sand out those innards. Consider nixing this off. You know, maybe sand out the back a little bit, but function-wise, it drops like a really nice knife. Very smooth. Had to work out the triad lock a little bit on this one. It was just a bit sticky. I'll give you a trick real quick. I know a lot of people have trouble with triad locks because they try to close it with their, kind of like the meat of their thumb, like this, and then it cuts them and it does all this stuff. The way that I close it, I actually use the bone in my thumb right here. I use the bone itself, and when I press it, I keep my finger up here and I don't go above that notch. And if you do that, even though it comes close, I've never been cut, ever, by the edge. And so I just drop it like that, and I kind of put pressure against the bottom hook here and the top hook so it's secure in my hand, use my bone of my thumb, and I don't feel like I'm pressing hard at all. But it's a nice smooth knife. I like that. So for part 2, what I'm going to do is just do a comparison of the actual use of these knives, maybe a fixed blade for comparison. I'll compare these knives in you know, woodworking, doing some regular tasks, things that you know how they usually perform. And I'm not going to cut a bunch of paper or cardboard boxes. I'm not going to do an edge retention test, really. I'm just going to show you how that edge actually performs and how the handle feels in my hand working with it, because this is supposed to be, you know, an overbuilt, hard-use knife. We're going to see if it is. Thanks. Go ahead and stick around for part 2, which will be coming out soon. Otherwise, you can watch one of these videos while you wait.